Hey Remodelaholics, welcome back to our DIY channel. Today I'm going to show you how I like to paint interior doors. All right, before you start, make sure you scrub your doors. You want to make sure, like right here, that you're getting any dust that sits, on the surfaces. Otherwise, the dirt can act as a barrier for the paint from adhering to the door. Next, you're going to want to remove your hardware. All right, so I'm going to leave this in here, but now I can paint up to the handle without any problems. In my house, I have the hollow core cheap old doors. They are a 6-panel door, and they have a faux wood print. And I think this is important because if it was a smooth door, I would have you paint it with a foam roller. But because this has a faux print, we are going to paint it with a brush. Any kind of roller that you use, no matter what, is gonna leave a slight orange peel, even the solid foam rollers that are meant to be smooth. They're smoother than most, but there is a little bit of stipple that you will get from any roller. But for this kind of door, we're gonna paint it with a brush, and I'm gonna show you how I like to do it. We work from the top down in sections. Because this door has the faux wood grain, we are gonna paint with the faux wood grain. This means with your paintbrush, you might have a little bit of paintbrush marks. However, there are ways to avoid big paintbrush marks, and I will talk about that as we go along. So you might be wondering, what is the best paint to use for doors like this? And I would say a satin or a semi-gloss interior paint. So doors get a lot of handling, they're moved, they're touched, they're scratched, keys hit them, all sorts of things. So you want something that is scrubbable. A matte paint looks beautiful, but it will get dirty really quickly from all of the handprints. You will get marks. It's just not the best place, and it's not as scrubbable. There are problems with matte paint, I feel like, for doors. So if you don't want a big shine on your door, then I would go with satin. If you don't mind a little bit of sheen on your door, then I would go with semi-gloss. Another trend that I really like is adding color to your doors. In this case, we have chosen to use satin interior paint. In this paint, we are using the stain blocking paint and primer in one from Behr, in the color dark navy. This door, I'm not going to use a ton of tape. The only place I did decide to tape was, if you can see, right in here on these hinges. I just find if I have an angled brush, I can just work around it, and I don't have to spend all the time painting and then being disappointed when the paint has bled through the tape, even though I spent all of that time taping. I have just a little bit of paint in here, and I'm going to start at the top of the door. In this fake molded door, there is a rail that goes horizontally between this point and this point. So I want to keep my brush strokes horizontal with that rail. And then if you'll notice, I'm not sure if you can see that, let's do a close-up. This is a vertical grain. So from this point, I'm going to take that paint that I just did, I got a little bit of a bead up there, and I'm going to make sure that I have these lines going vertical with that grain. I'm just going to take this brush along vertical with the grain and brush that out. Now, if you can see really close, there are already some lines. What I like to do is work my way down with the door, because if you just paint this section, you're gonna have these wiggly lines all around this and wiggly lines all around that. So I work in sections with the door. The only place I will say that I kind of work against the grain is this upper and lower section of the panel. I find it's easier to paint this in that groove, in those grooves, horizontally for this section and for the bottom section when I get to it, because this is horizontal and this is horizontal. It just works better. And then in these sections, we are going to paint vertically because this is vertical and this is vertical. I just kind of keep smoothing out the brush strokes. If you'll notice, I'm not putting on a lot of paint at a time. If I put a lot of paint on, I pick it up with my brush and move it around. Like, I'm not gonna put a big, thick glob of paint on that area. But you'll notice I have lines here. I've got to smooth those out. And you have to be really careful when there's all of these little bumps that you don't leave any big beads of paint. Okay, so like you could kind of accidentally see that. That is like, if you don't get those cleaned up, you'll have a big thing. And I actually just left them some there. So I'm gonna have to come back over here, smooth, smooth. And I need to pick up, I put way too much paint in that, so I've got to pick up some of that paint and actually remove it from that section to keep the brush strokes nice and clean and not get it too heavy. And I'm going to move it to the other places that need it and smooth out the brush strokes that are around it. Now, it is going to take me at least 2 coats to paint this door. Maybe 3, just because I'm painting it on so thinly. So now that I have this section done, I'm gonna move this way and I'm gonna keep going vertical in the vertical spaces. Okay, and I'm not going over this. If I do go over this, like let's say I accidentally go way up here, then I'm gonna smooth those brush strokes out to match the grain of the wood. Like right here, I've gone past this, so before I move on, I'm just gonna smooth those brush strokes out so that there's a nice clean line between these 2 sections, like the door has in its faux construction. And you've gotta move kind of quickly, because if you leave it on for any amount of time, it will leave marks that won't come off. In the middle of the panel, I'm gonna start right here, and I'm gonna move this paint around before I get to the edges so that I can avoid leaving big beads of paint at the edge of the panel. And again, this is the first coat, so I'm not worrying at all about the opacity of the paint. I'm just trying to fill all the spots with paint. I'm gonna go ahead and continue these side panels moving down. Again, don't put paint on from the top down, put it in the middle of the panel and then move that paint out so that you can avoid those big beads of paint. When you're painting on the edges, you might get a bead on the front of the door, so you have to be paying attention to both sides. Like, I can't just paint this like there's already a little bead over here, so I need to just make sure I knock that down so it doesn't dry. Try not to leave any big brush marks. So now in this part, I have kind of come over. I need to clean up this paint like that, the lines of the paint. I'm just concerned about the direction of the brush marks. There aren't a lot of brush marks because I have been moving the paint around. I'm not clumping it up. I'm just using the tips of my bristles, and I'm not like loading the paint up to here, all the way down to here. I'm gonna load up the area with paint, and then I'm gonna work it out. Move that around so that it's nice and thin, kind of lifting it up. So you've just got to kind of be looking at all the little corners and edges around you. And on this side, I'm going to clean up that edge really fast before the paint dries and just get those horizontal marks off of the vertical mark. All right, so I'm gonna work on this section. I'm gonna load up the paint in the middle, and then I'm gonna move it outwards. And I'm gonna just keep an eye on the edge of the door because I don't wanna leave a big bead of paint on that edge. The middle section of the door is gonna basically be the same as the upper section of the door. We're going to work on these panels and then smoothing it out and just making sure that you don't leave weird clumps of paint going in the wrong direction on the wood grain. I'm gonna start with this, and I'm just gonna start up here because we can. And this paint, it's been like 5 minutes. Most of it is totally dry because the coats are so thin. So if your paint is taking a long time to dry, you've probably painted it too thick. Like right now I have way too much paint right in this one spot. I've gotta move it with the wood grain down. Right here, I've got to get this. Ooh, look, I talked too much. I'm gonna rub it out. It actually did dry. We live in a very dry climate. And once I get all of the paint on the panel, I've got to go through and smooth out the brush strokes so I don't have like brush strokes starting in the middle of this part of the panel. It'll just look a lot nicer and feel really finished. So now I'm going to work my way across the interior panels. And with an angled brush, you can easily go to the angle of the board and have a nice clean line right there. Tell me, would you be afraid to paint your doors a crazy color? Not that this is crazy, it's navy. It's like, it's a beautiful color. Would you go with a blue on your doors, or would you just stick with black? I'm thinking that black was really fun when we first painted our doors, but now I am craving a little bit of color, and so instead of the walls, I'm putting it on the doors. I realized when I moved down here that the paint cloth is not even covering anything, so don't be like me. Make sure you put a paint cloth that actually reaches, but everything is on top of it and I don't want to move it. To move on to this bottom section, I'm going to finish this horizontal thing, and then I'm going to move these vertical sections down and then do the panels and move down. So one thing I want to mention while we're painting this that I think is important: clean your brushes. One of the reasons why people's projects look bad is because their brushes are dried out. Like, I even have a section right here, I can see they're coated with paint that has dried out, and it's making the bristles thicker and it's leaving bigger marks on your door, if that makes sense. Like, you've just quadrupled the size of your bristle, and so instead of a nice fine bristle that's putting the paint on your door, you're putting it on with a really heavy brush. Make sure that you do not like get real lazy and not clean your brushes. It's actually really easy. Sometimes when I am painting several projects, like we're painting several doors today, I will clean my brushes in the middle or once or twice, and just like rinse them out and scrub them off in the direction of the bristles with a metal scrubber. That's probably totally not kosher with the manufacturers, but it works for me. I keep my brushes really clean. I squeeze them out with a towel and hit them a couple times so that the extra water leaves. And then I don't have big problems with buildup of dried paint on my bristles. Okay. So right here, while I was talking to you, I missed this spot. And can you see those lines that it has created by, I can kind of erase them. Not sure that's good for the paintbrush. And I want to just kind of keep moving down and try to avoid leaving these big, thick brush marks in the wrong direction. Okay, so one way to avoid having big, heavy lines of paint is to go ahead and like paint like strands, draw it down so that there aren't any hard lines in that line of paint, and that way you won't see it as it dries. And this is not anybody's like particular style that I'm following here. It's just what I've learned over the years painting a lot of doors. We've remodeled like 7 homes. So I've painted at least probably 100 doors in my lifetime. I just find that this is what I like the best. And I'm really picky. If I'm gonna do a project, I don't wanna do it wrong, so I would rather just not have it done than do it fast and have it be looking crappy and regret it. Whenever I have done a project fast and not followed like my own advice, then or like really looked at it and researched how to do it right, then I've usually regretted it. Still, even with taking my time with thin coats, I can get Like I got 2 doors done yesterday in about 2 hours. Like it's not a lot of time. Be careful around the handle that you don't leave big beads of paint inside. On this last little bit of the door, I am going to work on the horizontal part first and get it nice and full. I'm gonna run over the vertical edges. The first coat of the paint is on this one side of the door, so I just need to paint the edges a little bit. If I'm painting the whole door, then what I'm gonna do is get half of the edge on this side and half of the edge on that side. They'll kind of just meet up and the edges will be painted pretty easily. But if you are just gonna go through and paint the edges, you really have to be careful that you don't leave a bead of paint on the edge of the door and have some weird lump on the actual front side of the door. It'd be better to have it on the edge of the door. I have cleaned my brush off. It's not perfect. It still probably has a little bit of blue in it, but it's a lot cleaner than it was. What are you doing? Don't run away yet. Don't run. Tiger, don't fall in the paint. I don't know what he wants.
He must be camera shy.
Yeah, he's a little shy. I'm gonna go ahead and paint a second coat on this door and this edge, so then when it dries, I can just shut it and not have to worry about this side again. All right, after I painted the inside, I let that dry, and then I painted the outside. Give us a thumbs up if these tips were helpful, and if we left anything out, please add it to the comments section below. We'd love to hear your ideas. And here is how the space turned out. It makes such a difference to have the doors painted. What do you think? Be sure to subscribe for more great videos, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye guys.